few chuckles over there. Here we go. Look at the credentials that I have with regards to my CV and my ministry bio. Isn't it impressive? And Timothy, you're going to learn. No, this is where Paul goes with this. He says, the only credentials that I brought were ineffective and arrogant. Wow. And yet God used me. In fact, I didn't know what I was doing. And look, God used Paul. Used him. He goes on and he says this. Here's a word that you can take to heart and depend on. Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners. I am proof. I am public sinner number one of someone who could have never made it apart from what? Sheer mercy. Now you might say to me, well, Pastor Ian, you've got a few credentials, and yes, you have a few sermons in your filing cabinet. And isn't it important in life to pursue credentials and to pursue these things? Well, I want to suggest, yes, it is. They all help in terms of leadership. They all help in terms of what it is to be who we are. In fact, I believe that God always wants to engage our intellect and our skills. Even we sang this morning, take my intellect and allow it to be used by you, God, in order to be a blessing to others. But that's the important part. You see this, is that you and I are not our credentials. Amen? You see, our credentials will become, and here's a hard saying, our credentials will become dust, just like us, when we die. And here's maybe a little bit of a thought for even you who are parents and grandparents. And this is something that I've also learned as well, too, is that sometimes maybe we can place a lot of pressure on our children and our young people to get the credentials that they need. And indeed, credentials are important. Don't get me wrong. But what you want to really encourage is that they become a good human being. And this is where Paul is driving at, because he knows that there are those who are looking at Timothy saying, well, you don't have the credentials to lead. You don't have the credentials, the wisdom, the knowledge to be in this position. And Paul is saying, no. It's about God's grace and mercy. And Paul could have been one who could have bragged about who he was and his knowledge. Indeed, as he says at one point, I was the Pharisee of the Pharisees. But it's all because of Jesus. And what's interesting, too, is he says, it's by the grace that even Jesus trusts me with his ministry and his mission and his purposes. Those of you who are maybe in positions of leadership, maybe in positions where you are mentoring someone, there's a part of it, too, where that's not just you, but maybe God has placed you in that role to be a mentor to someone. God is trusting you with that relationship in order that you might in some way reflect Jesus into that circumstance and into that person's life. I need to hear this morning. I'm not just preaching with you, I'm also preaching to my own heart here. Because some of us are like Timothy's this morning. We need to hear this. There's a part of it too, and this is for those of you who have a tendency to be a bit of perfectionists, right? And you know who you are. Perfectionists, and here it is, perfectionism can be just as dangerous as legalism. And here's my point. With the latter, you can judge others. You can condemn others with legalism. But with perfectionism, the danger is that you judge yourself. And in fact, that is not God's desire and his grace for you. You see, Timothy, as Paul says, you cannot make it without grace. It's all because of Jesus. For me, that's kind of freeing. It doesn't all depend on me. Even as the kids said this morning, we can pray, we can trust. We can gain encouragement from our brothers and sisters in Christ, and we can know that God is with us. I like what Eugene Peterson has written this. And this might be something that gets us thinking. And I want you to this might push your envelope a little bit in terms of your faith. Here it goes. He says this: we do not progress in the Christian life by becoming more competent, more knowledgeable, more virtuous, or more energetic. We do not advance in the Christian life by acquiring expertise. Each day, and many times a day, we simply turn back to square one, God said. Trust God. The third principle is this, and I sort of conclude with this morning. Trust God, and let's say it together. Trust God and keep a firm grip on your faith and yourself. Like all good leaders, Paul knows that he has to pass on his work to someone. In a sense, delegate. He says this. He says, I'm passing this work on to you, my son Timothy. Paul here is not just talking about trusting, but he also has to know he's trusting as well, too. He says this: the prophetic word that was directed to you prepared us for this. All those prayers are coming together now so that you will do this well, fearless in your struggle, keeping a firm grip on your faith and on yourself. After all, this is the fight that we are in. That's the Message translation. The NRSV, the NIV says, fight the good fight. Paul is passing his work on. And not only does he talk about trust, as I said, but he is trusting Timothy. He knows that Timothy has the training. He knows that Timothy has been prepared. He has been watching Paul. Paul has allowed Timothy to share in the ministry. He knows, in fact, that Timothy is being prayed for by other believers, other congregations that have been planted. They know about Timothy. But one of the things that Paul cannot do for Timothy is hold on to his faith. A story. I remember as a camper, and then later as a camp counselor, learning how to canoe. How many of you know how many have been in a canoe or learned how to canoe? Yes, okay, a few. Absolutely. You know what it is because you practice canoe techniques, how to paddle, how to hold the paddle, how to maneuver a canoe, and you begin by maneuvering a canoe in a lake, right? And that can be a bit of a challenge at times when you're learning how to do that. But I also remember as a camper, and then later on as a counselor, and also as a CIT leader, there was times when we would say, okay, you've done all the practicing, you've done all the learning, you've gained all that experience, now we're going to go on a 4-day canoe trip out into the middle of the wilderness. Well, I thought it was the wilderness. It wasn't the creature comforts of home, that's for sure. And oh, by the way, there are going to be rapids along the way. And there's nothing that can prepare you on a nice, calm lake for the rapids of the French River or the Magnetawan or the Pickerel Key River in northern Ontario. And I remember being taught this, and I remember also passing this message onto prospective canoers and trippers. The one thing that you want to do, those of you who know, what is the one thing you do when you are in the middle of a rapid going down? What is the one thing you do? You hold on to your paddle, yeah, right? Okay, and the reason that you do that is because it can help you steer your canoe. But the other thing too is if you don't hold onto your paddle, you're on a 4-day canoe trip, right? What happens? Yeah, you're paddling like this. Well, there's another way you can look at it too. You say, oh yeah, okay, you just keep paddling, guys. I'm going to relax. I lost my paddle back at the rapids, right? That wouldn't go over too well, actually, with your canoe mates. I sort of chuckled. I found this on the internet too. I don't know whether that's joy or fear. Grip that paddle going through those turbulent waters. Paul says, keep a hold of your faith and hold of yourself. And I think this is the analogy that Paul was trying to encourage Timothy about in his own life. Timothy, you're going through some rough waters right now. You're dealing with some turbulence in your life. You're going to be fighting the storms of opinion and of criticism. Your leadership is going to be questioned. It's not always going to be smooth waters, but keep a firm grip on your faith and also on yourself. Know who you are in Jesus. Now, Paul didn't maybe know a whole lot about whitewater canoeing, but I think the analogy comes from holding onto a tiller in a boat, keeping that rudder secure. And as he says later on in another version, he says, don't get shipwrecked like others who have let loose on their faith. So my friends, maybe this is the takeaway for you this morning from our message today. Timothy was feeling overwhelmed with his calling and his task and his leadership. He was looking back and maybe he was feeling somewhat like a failure. And he was looking forward and he was dealing with anxiety. He didn't know what was the future held for him. And so he needed a courage. He needed to be encouraged that comes about through faith and trust, and to know that Christ was with him. And maybe this is you today. Maybe you're experiencing some turbulent waters. Maybe it's a task that you've been given that's causing you some fear. Maybe you're in a leadership situation that you're uncertain about. Maybe you're putting pressure on yourself to get from point A to point B in order to perform. Going back, take a listen to this. Maybe don't wish your task away because it is hard, but be encouraged that you have been chosen for a task, a calling, a purpose that is greater than you, in which you have to trust in someone greater than simply who you are. Maybe this is the prophetic word that you need to hear this morning, to trust in the true love of Jesus. To trust in his mercy and his grace. Because really that's all that matters in the end. To keep a firm grip on your faith now and keep a firm grip on yourself in Jesus. Courageous. As Paul says, and I conclude, all those prayers are coming together now, so you will do this well. Fearless in your struggle, keeping a firm grip on your faith and on yourself. After all, this is a fight that we are